your example of Clinton is perfect because, of course, Clinton was groomed, and Clinton became, of course, even and especially most markedly after he left office, but even while he was in office, playing with the same groups that corporate groups that fund candidates on the other side. Now the system is really fundamentally in such a state now that it's difficult for, I think, people, well-meaning people who want to see reform, to try to figure out where you get a handle on it. The environmental movement, I think, has been the most promising, interesting, and important movement, perhaps, in the last 50 years. And it certainly has accomplishments that it can point to, especially, I think, the sort of unheralded accomplishments of environmental groups at the local level, where they're active all the time. They don't receive much publicity, but they've done so much to ensure clean water and clean air and good food and the rest of it. But it's been a struggle, and I think that the struggle, is going to have to go on. But I still think it's important for there to be some kind of lead, whether one can think about a third party at this time or not. I'm not sure. I think the history of third parties has not been promising in this country. But I do think that unless there can be some kind of rivalry introduced, serious rivalry, serious competition, that would force either the Republican or the Democratic Party to really reveal its true colors or to begin to change. I don't think that the national system is fixable. It's not fixable, I don't think, on the terms that it has been that have been established in the last 3 or 4 decades.
Well, hold on. Let me get you to go a little further in one direction then. And
sure.
Here is a question. And this may seem odd, but I'm looking at it as from a purely humanistic point of view. The President of the United States and Congress has the power to exercise executive orders that could put a moratorium on all home foreclosures and car repossessions. Mm-hmm. If we really cared about the people, why wouldn't we do that, especially since the Democrats control all 3 areas, and they had the power to keep people in their homes instead of throwing them on the streets. And the very people who are throwing them on the streets are the very banks that same Congress has given money with no strings attached and no openness, no transparency. Wouldn't the people at some point begin to see that this game is afoot when their interests are not being addressed, and yet the corporate interests, especially the money corporate interests, are?
Well, certainly the bailout indicates and reinforces that point no end. It's a scandal of just enormous proportions in which you try to fix a system by the very institutions which helped to create the disaster in the first place. But it is that's one, incidentally, that's a very good example of how the attempts to call in the New Deal as a helpful precedent is just so wrong-headed. The New Deal was anti-bank, anti-financial. And here, in the case of what's happened at the tail end of the Bush administration and the beginning of the Obama administration, is, of course, the only conception you seem to have of how you can fix the system is to help bail out the banks. And the notion that is going to help an economy which is struggling to survive in a globalized economy, an economy in which we're losing jobs continuously, in which manufacturing goes overseas, in which unions are having a terrible time trying to expand their membership. It seems to me that the bailout was a perfect picture of what kind of political system we have. And again, the lack of opposition, the lack of coherent opposition is again so amazing. Ironically, of course, the only groups which have attacked the bailout and so on have been conservative Republicans, and for the wrong reasons, but they've attacked it, and the Democrats have remained virtually silent. So that the notion of where you can turn for reform is very difficult kind of to seize. I can't see any hope in the Democratic Party at all. I still insist that the only way the world's going to be changed is locally, incrementally, gradually, and persistently.
Well, I think many people agree with that, and I supported Ralph Nader, and I will say this: had he become president, we wouldn't be in Iraq, we wouldn't be in Afghanistan, we would not be supporting the military-industrial complex the way we did. But that's a separate issue. Now, there is a part of the issue because it ties in again to your concept. I don't believe we could have any form of inverted totalitarianism, your notion, if we did not also have the militarization of life. I remember at the time I was struck by it. Bill Clinton did something that hitherto no president in American history had done. When the military budget had been given by the Defense Department and the various agencies, the 24 major agencies of the government involved in national security, he then went above and beyond that and gave them an additional $7 billion. And it was interesting because they didn't ask for it. So there was kind of this puzzle about, well, what do we give it back? What do we do? Of course, they don't give anything back, and they'll find some boondoggle project that was squandered on. And I thought, my God, this man is catering, once again, to all of those special interests. It's interesting then to see later how many of those military contractors gave huge amounts of money to the Clinton Foundation. But be that as it may, past totalitarian regimes have turned to the military buildup as a means to harness in the patriotism of the population, which in turn aided the government to manage control over the population itself. It now seems, from what you're saying, in light of your analysis, that this is exactly what has taken place during the Bush era on war on terror and the occupations of both Afghanistan and Iraq. Why is the military so closely aligned with this concept of this totalitarian approach where we are not being honest? We're not having a debate in the Democratic Party nor the Republican Party about why we're in this permanent war state, why we don't question the budget, which is now excessive of $1.1 trillion when you include offline and online budget concerns for the Pentagon and the defense establishment, and where every expert I've been able to find says that we could be completely safe if we had only $200 billion spent each year, which is still exceeding that of Russia and China combined, and yet we're spending 10 times more than all the other governments in the world combined on our military-industrial complex, and yet no one is questioning it. You're considered lacking in patriotism. If you do, Bill O'Reilly said, oh, then you must want the enemy to win. If you question our military efforts, as if every penny we spend is going to make us safe and none of it is squandered on duplicity and obsolescence and profiteering. And why aren't we facing this enormous dynamic?
Well, I think what's important there is, again, it's treated in the book, is the transformation that's taken place in the military in recent years. It has been incorporated just like democracy. That is it's inseparable from the corporate world now. When you think about the contracts that military people are encouraged to undertake with corporations for armaments, planes, guns, you name it. And then you also add to it the phenomenon that's taken place with the military that had taken place with public officials, the revolving door. Military people join corporations. Corporate people come and become assistant secretaries or secretaries of the Army or the Navy or what have you. In other words, the military is as much a part of the corporate system as any other element in American society, and at the same time, it contributes to the dynamic that we've talked about before in terms of corporate power. That is, they are never satisfied. There is always a new airplane, a new tank, a new this, a new that. And the same is true of other instrumentalities. So that the military has now not only assumed an enormous part of the budget, over 20%, but again,